This is John Kohler with growingyourgreens.com. I have another exciting episode for you today. So what I'm going to show you today is how to set up and plant out your raised bed garden with tomatoes. So you can see here we have a raised bed that was the broccoli bed. We finally got it cleared out. I layered on some new compost and rock dust on top, and it's actually rained a lot, so it's actually leveled it out. It actually looks nice and pretty. But now what we're going to do is we're going to plant some tomatoes. So what I like to use is called the square foot gardening method. Also another form of it is actually called biointensive, which promotes similar planting spaces, like packing plants close together so that you could basically achieve the highest amount of yields and wasting the least amount of space. Now that is particularly important in a situation like this. I'm literally in my front yard of a standard residential housing tract. And I don't have a lot of space and acreage to plant, a lot of plants. So I really got to plant a high density and smaller number of plants because I just don't have the room. So the square foot gardening method, they basically have a couple different specifications. So one specification is for like smaller tomatoes, or maybe determinate tomatoes. And once again, I'll go ahead and go over determinate and indeterminate tomatoes if you don't know what that means. Basically, determinate tomatoes grow to a certain size. Generally they're smaller, they don't just vine out and grow like humongous, and they put on one large crop, and once that large crop comes on and is put on, then it pretty much doesn't produce anymore. So that once again is determinate. It has a determined lifespan. Whereas the indeterminates, basically you could plant them, they'll grow, they'll pump out tomatoes, they'll keep growing, they'll grow as a vine, they'll keep probably growing down your street if you let them, if your season was long enough, like in the tropics where it doesn't freeze. And they'd continue to put out tomatoes and tomatoes and tomatoes and tomatoes and tomatoes until, I don't know until what happens. Until it got tired. Until it wanted to take a nap. But the determinants just keep going, basically, for most cases, and in most cases, like for me, until it gets too cold, until it freezes, and it just doesn't make it anymore. So for the determinate tomatoes, they basically recommend 1 foot spacing. So basically planting each stem of each tomato approximately 1 foot apart. That's 12 inches. So I have a tape measure. Sometimes I also use a yardstick or just a ruler to space out my plants accordingly. Now once again, that is if you are going to stake and trellis your plants and train them upright. And I might also encourage you to do what's called the single stem method. I'm not going to cover that in this video, but check my other videos for a really good video actually on single stemming your tomato plants. It's really easy. Basically, you're just punching out the suckers out of the armpits. And I mean, literally, that's what it is. Just think of my armpit, and there's a plant growing out of my armpit, and John doesn't want a plant out of his armpit. Pinch it off. So you're just going to train it up, single stem it all the way up, and one plant per 1 square foot, it should be fine. So I'm going to be planting mostly indeterminate plants, the ones that keep vining out and produce tomatoes forever, and I'm hoping that I won't get a frost this year. Got my fingers crossed, and the weather will be really nice, and it'll be the tropics now in California. I doubt that'll happen, but I could always wish. But in any case, I'm going to plant the tomatoes because they are indeterminates. I'm going to give them more space. I'm going to plant them 24 inches apart, so 2 feet apart. So you can see that, because I'm planting indeterminates and I'm planting them 24 inches apart, I can't fit as many as if I were planting them 1 foot apart. Now there are pros and cons of planting determinates versus indeterminates, and single stemming versus not single stemming. And I'm not really going to get into that today, but I'm just going to show you I'm planting my plants 24 inches apart. Last year, actually, or 2 years ago, I did plant them 18 inches apart. And it was just too close, and I had small trellises. This year I'm happy to say that I'm using the Texas tomato cage. So this is actually just the top half of the Texas tomato cage out here that I'm going to only use for the spacing only. This is not the full thing, but after you see it all built and planted out, you'll see the full trellises. I mean, they're 6 feet tall, and I think this is actually one of the key considerations that's going to make my plants grow a lot better. Another reason why you want to have some distance between the plants, besides like the roots, letting the roots grow, and if your plants are too close together, the roots are too close together, they're basically going to steal, nutrients from each other. It's like when you and your brother or you and your sister were kids and you'd fight over that one piece of cake. Well, hey, if you each got a piece of cake, you wouldn't be fighting. But even me and my brother, we would fight over who got the 2 millimeter larger piece of cake. So we'd have a scheme, or I'd have a scheme. I'd cut and he'd choose, and as soon as I'd cut, I'd say, I want that one, which was the smaller one, and then he'd always go for the smaller one. So it's reverse psychology. But in any case, besides the roots, just, you know, being able to get the nutrition above the ground, all the plants basically need to get nice airflow and air circulation, and also light from the sun. You know, if the plants are too close together, they're going to shade each other out, and each plant's not going to get as much sun. If the plant doesn't get as much sun, then it's not going to produce as much fruit for you. Same thing with the air circulation. If there's not enough air circulation between the plants, then, you know, you could get disease, and that's not a good thing either. So I found the 2 feet spacing is pretty good, and give them some space to breathe with these Texas tomato cages are definitely really a good thing. So next, I'm going to start laying out the bed, and we're going to use the Texas tomato cage. So these are the real bottoms that go into the ground. They unfold, and these long stakes go into the ground to anchor this cage into the ground, you know, so it's not going to be wobbly or tip over. It's going to be nice and stationary. Once we put this in, you could put the extension in that fits onto the top to get it up to the 6 feet high height. Now I do recommend these tall, 6 foot tall Texas tomato cages when you're specifically using indeterminate. Those are the vining plants that'll pretty much grow forever until it gets too cold. So these cages are really good. I mean, these are just serious cages. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to make an investment in these cages, and they're pretty much going to last you forever. They fold flat to store. They can be used year after year after year. I like them a lot. So next, let's go ahead and do the layout. Normally I would do the layout if I wasn't using the cages by using a standard tape measure and taping off, you know, how far the plants are going to go. I like to use things like these flags or little sticks to denote where I'm going to put the plants. You know, if I'm measuring out, I could measure there, and then I'm going to basically offset my rows, have 3 rows, put one there, one there. But, you know, because I have the cages, and these cages are approximately 20 inches from end to end, I'm going to let the cages do my spacing for me. So if I just put 2 of these cages right next to each other, middle to middle, it's going to be approximately 20 inches. So I want 24, you know, which is my 2 foot spacing. So we're going to let the cages do all the measuring for me, and it's going to be about right. So that's going to be really cool. So let me go ahead, do that next. All right. First Texas tomato cage going into place. Man, that's nice and solid, fits right in the ground. I mean, this is definitely a sturdy cage. There's cage number 1. I just gotta do the rest of them. Now, as you can see, we have 2 side by side, and we could do like 2 rows all the way down. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset the middle row. So the goal is to be able to reach into the middle one between all the space, you know, that the ones are on the side are growing out. So with these cages, it'll make that pretty easy to do. So let's go ahead and place this 3rd row, or the middle row. So literally where I put these cages, right in the middle of the cage, is where the tomato is going to get planted. So I already got 10 cages in the bed. This will be the 11th cage going in the bed. We got them nice and evenly spaced, and I mean, it's just really easy to set these guys up. You just push them into the ground. These long stakes go right in the ground. I think that's probably about at least 1.5 feet, but then you could determine if you want it all the way to the ground or almost to the ground. I think I'm basically putting about 1 foot under the ground for each trellis. So let's go ahead and put this last one in. So there you go. I got all 11 trellises in place. Once again, these are the Texas tomato cage, nice, heavy duty. They fold compact, and this is only the bottom half. And the top half is actually right here. Go ahead and grab one of these guys. And this just basically unfolds once again. And then you just need to line these guys up. Oops, line them up and put them in here, and it's kind of like a little extension thing. Goes together that easy. And there it is. There's the full cage made. So for now, we're just going to go ahead and keep the bottom halves on while we plant. And you know, we might just let the plants grow up a little while before we put the tops on, because this actually gets kind of big and it's not quite needed yet. So I like that you have the capability or the option of, you know, leave the cage on full or leave it half height, so it looks just a little bit cleaner, you know, until you really need the cage around the tomato plant. Next, I'm going to go in the back, get the tomato plants out, and I'm going to plant them up. Got everything planted out, worked all good, put the Texas tomato cages in the bed. Once again, we only put half of them on. The other half's going to go, and you know, basically these are going to be 6 feet tall. So that's definitely going to be enough support for the tomatoes. And this is nice because you could reach in really nice compared to what I was using in prior years, basically some galvanized fencing. So definitely really good. And we're just going to go ahead and let these grow a little bit taller before we put on the extensions there. So no real big trick to planting them out. Basically, you know, I took off some of the leaves and planted them fairly deep as I could go, and so that there'll still be some foliage above. You know, tomatoes, you could plant them deeper up the stem because they will root out the stem. Peppers may also do that, although I've heard mixed reports, but with tomatoes, it's always better to, you know, bury them a little bit deeper. So other than that, the only thing when I dug the hole, besides burying them deeper, I use this stuff here, just basically mycorrhizal inoculant. So I like that a lot, and previously we had actually enriched the bed with rock dust and worm castings and some kelp actually. But now it's all planted out. Next job is to basically readjust the drip emitters, since we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows on the drip emitters and we won't need to use all of them. We're going to actually plug some of them up, take some emitters out, and you know, just let it drip like normal. Let's see, other things I might do. I might plant some basil in here to go along with. It's a nice companion plant to the tomato. And also plant some marigolds, which will actually look really nice, probably along the borders. And you know, that'll definitely work out well, like it did last year, just look really beautiful. So hopefully you've enjoyed this episode, learning more about planting 11 tomato plants in a 4-foot by 10-foot bed. Once again, this is John Kohler with growingyourgreens.com. We'll see you next time, and keep on growing.